Well, Democrats are in the middle of a not very well covered but absolutely real civil war. It's not about policy or fixing the country's problems. It's about impeachment. Will they or won't they? They can't decide. That's next. Years, the Democrats promised their voters that a thorough investigation would uncover a plot by Donald Trump to sell this country to Vladimir Putin and Russia. Well, it didn't happen. They didn't find that. But instead of moving on or maybe working with Trump to help the country improve, they've adopted a new line. The president committed a cover-up.
We believe that no one is above the law, including the President of the United States, and we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up.
She keeps coming back to the things like accountability and that there's a cover-up. And those are the two essential issues that let's keep following where the evidence leads us.
It's starting to look more like a cover-up in that he doesn't let anyone come and testify before Congress. Innocent people don't act like the president.
What exactly did the president cover up? Nobody knows. What should we do about it? Democrats can't agree on that either. Critically, Nancy Pelosi is struggling to keep control of Democrats in the House, but more radical elements in her party say impeachment is the only option. Who will win this battle? Luis Miranda is a former DNC communications director, and he joins us tonight. Luis, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
Should the president be impeached?
I think that the House should definitely move forward on impeachment proceedings because the Mueller report showed very clearly that he had done exactly the kind of obstruction of justice that you saw laid out in the articles of impeachment for Richard Nixon. And now, as we see what he's doing to keep Congress from carrying out its investigation, forcing even private citizens who no longer work for the government to not be able to come in and testify, it just shows exactly what it said on Article 3 of the articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon.
Okay. So, why isn't the Speaker of the House, the much venerated Nancy Pelosi, why isn't she, if it's so obvious, why isn't she behind this?
I think she's working with her caucus to bring them together and work not just on things like what you need to do on impeachment, which I think some of the investigations are going to help with that, especially, as I just said, the investigations that are now calling on subpoenas of former administration officials, and Donald Trump is stepping in and not letting them. That's an example of an impeachable offense. And so I think that she's trying to bring everyone on the same page and move it forward in a constructive way. But I do think that Democrats, but Tucker, I think Democrats here made a mistake.
She's not for impeachment. She said that. Okay, you think they made a mistake? I think they made a mistake. Pelosi, whatever you think of her, she's a very sophisticated person who's been in Washington for an awfully long time.
Incredible operator, and she's doing a terrific job with her caucus. However, I think the Democrats made a mistake in slow walking. She doesn't want
impeachment. Okay, but she slow-walked it because she knows it will hurt the Democratic Party. You disagree with that?
I do disagree. I think that, they're comparing this to the impeachment, what happened in the 90s with Bill Clinton. But at that time, you had Republicans investigating Socks the cat, Tucker. You remember this. Socks the cat was being investigated over the kinds of letters he was getting from children around the country, Tucker. That's why the American people rejected impeachment. I think at this point, as you start to see what's actually coming out, the Deutsche Bank situation where a court ruled just yesterday that, in fact, the Congress does have oversight, does have the right to investigate. I think all of these things will continue to show that the pattern of obstruction of justice, of behavior that is just not consistent with the oath that the president took, is important. Because at the end of the day, Tucker, the Republican Party is a party of the rule of law. And if we skirt it, if we flout it, if we treat it like it doesn't matter, we might as well be a third world country at this point, Tucker.
But I don't think
that's just not where we should be.
Then we'll have sanctuary cities where people ignore federal immigration law. That would be crazy.
If you believe in the rule of law, then we should definitely protect our democracy. Absolutely.
Okay, right. Well, I've heard that for 3 years from people who have zero interest in democracy at all, who spent the whole time, the last 2 years, trying to undo an election result because they hate democracy so much. So look, there are a lot of things you say about Trump, but don't cast opposition to Trump as a defense of democracy. It's not, actually. Trump is what you get in
2018. I think the Democrats won the House of Representatives in part because this country recognizes that sometimes divided government is better. You have a government that keeps checks and balances together. And
I think
if you're not
people do want that, but
if you're going to have control of the House of
impeachment.
Representatives and not actually conduct and carry out your constitutional duty of oversight and holding President Trump accountable, when you see example of him disrespecting what Congress was intended to do,
we just had 2.5 years of Russia investigation.
Undermine our democracy. And the Mueller report shows that there was clear obstruction of justice.
Right. All right. I'm not going to get mad about it. I do think you're going to doom whoever the candidate is to a loss if you impeach, but you obviously disagree. And
I remember 2010 when so many Democrats shied away from defending the Affordable Care Act because they were afraid that Democrats would criticize them on it. Well, Republicans would criticize them on it. Republicans are going to criticize you over impeachment whether you do it or not. You might as well live up to what the forefathers put in the Constitution for you to do in Congress, which is to have oversight over the executive branch.
Luis, good luck with that. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks, Tucker. Good to see you, too.
Well, thanks to Nancy Pelosi, the phrase cover-up dominated cable news today. Watch.
Nancy Pelosi describes President Trump as being engaged in a cover-up.
One of the things that she said is that the Trump administration is engaged in a cover-up.
She said President Trump is engaged in a cover-up.
Comments Pelosi had made this morning that the president had engaged in a cover-up.
She accused the president of engaging in a cover-up.
The president complaining to the Speaker of the House that she accused him of a cover-up.
That phrase, cover-up, from Nancy Pelosi really set him off.
Over at MSNBC, one anchor accused the president of a cover-up for refusing to publicize his private life.
When you talk about, I don't do cover-ups, there's also the fact that he has been refusing to let his current and former aides testify, refusing to turn over documents that have been demanded, including the tax returns, also refusing to grant an interview to Robert Mueller.
Joe Concho watches an awful lot of television. He writes about media for The Hill, and he joins us tonight. Joe, is it my imagination, or did once again the Speaker of the House deliver the talking point that everyone in cable news eagerly took up and repeated?
I think you're seeing a pattern here, Tucker. I remember back in January, the term manufactured crisis was used to talk about what was going on at the U.S. southern border. And then you heard over and over, dozens upon dozens of times, and not just from one network, but different networks, different anchors or pundits or guests using that same exact term to the word manufactured crisis. Now, sure enough, as we know, and even the New York Times admits, it's no longer a manufactured crisis at the border. That's a real thing. Story for another time. And then we had the other crisis, which was the constitutional crisis. And that was 2 weeks ago when Bill Barr, after he testified in front of the Senate, decided not to do so with the House when they changed the rules around as far as staffers being able to question him, which had never happened in Congress before. And he said, this is going to be a circus. No, thanks. I'm not going to show up. So that became a constitutional crisis. And Pelosi says that as well. And sure enough, the Media Research Center, and I get they're conservative, but the numbers here are usually accurate. They found that between May 8th and May 12th, that on ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, and MSNBC, that exact term, constitutional crisis, was uttered 386 times. I'm not very good at math, but I'm pretty sure that's more than 70 times if you average it out per network. So yeah, it goes out one mouth, it comes out another mouth, and now here we are with cover-up, and that will be the next new constitutional crisis as far as terms that we hear over and over again, as if it's an echo chamber.
We're entering campaign season. There's a presidential campaign in progress already. At some point, these are campaign finance violations. These are television networks donating to presidential campaigns to a party and not declaring it.
That would be very interesting to see that case be made, perhaps. But no, it just seems to be that people are taking their cues from one party in this business and not the other, particularly from Pelosi. And look, I wanted to hear some reporters yell at her the way that Trump is yelled at. What cover-up are you specifically talking about? Who's involved in this cover-up? Is Bob Mueller involved in this cover-up? Because he's been reluctant to testify to this point. So is he also part of the cover-up that now includes, I believe, Bill Barr, Don McGahn, Cato Kalin, the White House chef? I mean, who else is involved in this deep conspiracy of people who otherwise probably don't like the president that much, but are willing to put their careers on the line to cover up for him? It's quite comical on some level, actually.
It is kind of amazing. I hope we get to the bottom of it. I know there are Russians there somewhere. Joe, thank you.